What is up everyone, my name is Moth, welcome back to my channel if you're one of my new subscribers, and welcome to the channel if this is your first time being here. In today's video, I'm going to be doing my second character review video. The character will be our 5-star standard banner wind element character, Bronya of the Harmony Path. Bronya is an excellent offensive support character. She's going to greatly enhance your main damage dealer's offensive capabilities, and she's a really flexible team player character as she slots well into the role of driving your main damage dealer's offensive output, offering you some flexibility for your other 3rd and 4th slots when team building. So in today's video, I'm going to be going over her kit, followed by her potential build options with the information that we have as of the final closed beta, and then finally we'll be covering her potential team comps in some detail to give you an idea of what teams you can run to fit Bronya into. With that said, let's get into it. Okay, so before we jump straight into her kit, I will flag her technique up front. This is the ability that will trigger when she starts a battle. Now, her technique is a flat 15% attack increase for 2 turns, but it is worth noting that it doesn't stack with other techniques. So, for example, if you've got someone with a technique like Dan Huang, who does a 30% attack bonus to himself before starting a battle, Bronya's 15% team attack increase won't stack with that ability, but the other users will get the 15% attack increase. So her kit is really simple. Like I say, it's focused on doing some offensive utility increases to your main damage dealer. Typically in this sense, Bronya won't be the person receiving those buffs, although I have seen some people run her that way, but today's video will not be focusing on that style of Bronya. I want to cover a nice general approach to how the character is set up. So her basic attack, Wind Ride Bullet. It's a single target damage dealing wind attack. It deals up to 140% of Bronya's attack to the target. It's your pretty standard wind basic attack shenanigans, but it's worth noting as a basic attack it's going to be a good way to generate some skill points. And as we go through her kit, mainly her minor traces, she starts to really ramp up with her wind damage bonuses. So potential sub DPS options there, but she's not going to fulfill a sub DPS role. So her skill, Combat Redeployment, utilizes the advanced forward mechanic. Because Honkai Star Rail is a turn-based combat style game, this is a really handy mechanic to have because it will basically speed up the rate at which a character can take the next action. So Combat Redeployment, the character that she targets on your team will move forward by a 100% increase. It's the main focus of the skill, but it also increases their damage by quite a high percentage based on the level of the skill. Note that this isn't crit damage, it's just damage overall, so it doesn't discriminate on certain types of builds, and it can also dispel a debuff from an ally, so cleanse them. Overall, a really good skill to have handy and ready to cast. And then we have her ultimate, the Balobog March. This is going to increase the attack of all your allies by 36% and increase their crit damage equal to 12% of Bronya's crit damage, plus another 12% for 2 turns, scaling up to 18 and 24% respectively. Finally, her talent. After Bronya uses her basic attack, Bronya's next action will be advanced forward by up to 37.5% depending on level. So the whole idea of this is that basically if she doesn't have her skill or ultimate ready, you're not going to lose too much time in between those turns while you are then charging things up. Okay, so with her basic kit covered, let's talk traces. Her first major trace, Command, it's her basic attack trace. It's going to give it 100% crit rate bonus to her basic attack, giving her potential sub DPS opportunity window when she's using her basic attack if her skill and her ultimate are down. Upon ascending this further, this trace gets a 5% crit damage and a 3.2% wind damage bonus. Her second major trace, Battlefield, which is her skill trace, it's going to give a 20% defense buff to all allies for 2 turns at the start of the battle. And her third major trace, Military Might, it's her ultimate trace, all allies deal 10% more damage. Now her minor traces all lean towards dropping in some extra crit damage and wind damage into her kit. There's a 7% crit damage boost in skill trace with another 10% crit damage in the 3rd tier of her ultimate trace. These crit damage stat increases are important to remember as part of the buff in her ultimate will scale on a percent of Bronya's crit damage. Additionally, from the maths that we have at the moment, it looks like there's a total of 18.6% wind damage bonus scattered throughout the skill tree. So overall, like I say, you can see some potential opportunities for Bronya to deal a bit of sub DPS in her wind basic attacks, but I wouldn't aim towards dealing damage through Bronya, and I would still maximize my focus on making sure that Bronya is dealing the maximum amount of damage via your main damage dealer through Bronya's buffs. Okay, so with traces covered, I'd now want to move on to Eidolons. Now, as noted in my Yanqing guide, pulling for standard banner Eidolons is incredibly difficult, as we are looking at potentially 7+ character objects in the standard banner, and then equally 7 light cones to match those characters. I personally would not recommend investing your Stellar Jade into Star Rail passes for the sake of trying to pull a copy of a standard banner character due to the randomized odds of gacha banners. With that said, her Eidolons are worth covering because you might end up getting lucky and running across multiple copies of Bronya on your standard pulls or even your off-rate gacha limited time pulls. So her E1 is going to give her skill a 50% chance of recovering a skill point on a 1-turn cooldown. Her E2, called Quick March, will increase the speed of the ally you use her E on by 30% for 1 turn, so upping her skill utility. Her E3 and her E5 are just +2 levels to her ultimate and skill respectively, and her E4 is very situational because when Bronya uses a basic attack on an enemy with a wind weakness specifically, she immediately follows up with another wind-based attack equal to 80% of her basic attack damage. Now, I'm not sure if this extra hit will crit, but it's a small DPS increase only against enemies with a wind weakness. Her E6, called Piercing Rainbow, now the ally damage boost effect of Bronya's E or her skill will receive the buff for another turn. Now this doesn't read like it will replicate the action brought forward effect, so be mindful of that, but the extra damage bonus is an excellent buff to your carry. With that said, 6 Eidolons is some pretty heavy investment, and at that point I'd be very surprised if your characters weren't already maxing out on perfect optimized rotations. Taking her whole kit into consideration, Bronya looks to be a really amazing character. Now, you should take note that the kit, traces, and Eidolons all together, she is primarily an offensive support character with a potential slot for some single target wind sub DPS in certain specific windows. When thinking about Bronya as a pull, she will definitely fill that offensive optimization role well. With that said, I don't want to jump into any team building just yet, but it will be worth bearing in mind that other than her debuff cleanse and her 100% action brought forward ability in her skill, she offers no defensive utility, and so you will always want to pair her with one main DPS that will essentially funnel her kit into. With her kit covered, let's get into some potential build options, starting with light cones and then moving on to relic with the goal of optimizing her offensive support playstyle while bearing in mind that she needs to stay alive to be able to offer those buffs to your main damage dealer. So for light cones, Bronya does have her 5-star signature weapon, The Battle Isn't Over. The 5-star Harmony light cone will be in the standard banner and as an off-rate gacha weapon, so you may be lucky enough to come across it. The passive of this weapon is the focus of course, and at base it will increase Bronya's energy regeneration by 8% and regenerate a skill point every time she uses her ultimate up to 2 casts of the ultimate. Additionally, when she casts her skill, the next ally to take action will deal an extra 30% at base. These modifiers for energy regeneration rate and damage boost rise to 16 and 60% at max refine with the information we currently have, but the skill point generation will always remain at 1. The skill's passive on this weapon will be insane because if you remember that Bronya already boosts the damage of the ally she buffs with her skill, when you combine it with The Battle Isn't Over, you're going to see a massive bonus at base, which will set you up for some disgusting nukes in my opinion. I'm not going to lie, if I managed to pull Bronya, I would personally then invest my Starlight exchange currency into her weapon in the weapon shop, as it's just too good for me to pass up if, like I say, I already have a Bronya. Of course, the 5-star weapon would be great to have, but there is a range of easier to obtain weapons at your disposal, given the fact that Bronya sits in the Harmony path and you just want to play her as a flexible support character when it comes to light cones. So, Tingyun's Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a gacha weapon, but it can be used as you'll be able to apply a random buff at the start of the battle and every time Bronya acts. These buffs are going to range from an attack increase, a crit damage increase, or an energy regeneration rate increase. Now it is worth noting that these are random and they do not stack, but each effect can run simultaneously. For the really free-to-play options, we also have 2 3-star weapons. The first up is the Chorus, which will give you an attack increase of 12% to allies upon entering battle, but I will note that this doesn't stack if you're using more than one Harmony character in your team and they want to share the same light cone. So we do have another 3-star option, the Meshing Cogs. This is going to raise Bronya's energy regeneration by up to 8 energy per turn at max refinement when she takes damage once per turn, giving her the energy she needs to be able to keep her ult up and running when needed. As a support, she is quite variable with her light cones. Now the obvious main pull would be her signature light cone, as in my opinion it's grossly effective when factoring in her full kit, but I wouldn't personally chase for it if you're on scarce resource management, because the 3 and 4-star options work perfectly fine as her kit is already pretty busted. With Lightcon covered, let's talk relics. So if you don't know, in Honkai Star Rail you get a main artifact set and a sub artifact set, or kind of like an accessory set. The main will have a 1 2-piece and 4-piece effect for the same set, or 2 2-piece effects, while the latter, the accessory set, will have a flat 2-piece effect. Knowing Bronya's role, let's get into the ideal sets that I would drop on her with the current artifact sets we have at launch. So I might be proven wrong, but don't fall tempted to look at the 4-piece 25% crit damage bonus of Hunter Glacial Forest and think this will work on Bronya. In my opinion, it reads like that the 25% crit damage bonus is only going to be applied after Bronya has used her ultimate, thereby not passing this on through her buff. Not only this, but then if you want to carry across the crit damage bonus, you're going to then want to use your ultimate pretty quickly and you might not always have permanent uptime. In my opinion, this is too situational to even work for Bronya, and you're also wasting a 2-piece set, so I personally would not recommend the 4-piece Hunter of Glacial Forest, even though it reads like it could work with Bronya's kit. With the information we have right now, I would honestly recommend the Eagle of Twilight lane. This 2-piece bonus will give her a 10% wind damage for those basic attacks she will be dealing, but the 4-piece will give her a 25% advanced forward on casting her ultimate, giving her some more time to get back in line and get those skills off. You could also go for the Guard of Wuthering Snow set as a 4-piece if you have it lying around from when you're first starting your account and building other characters. It's going to give her some sustain in the 2-piece effect and then some energy restoration in the 4-piece. But to be honest, it's really situational and it feels like you'd never be able to capitalize on the effect unless you weren't running a healer. So I just don't know if I could say this would be a more effective set other than the Eagle of Twilight when it's sat right there. For her minor artifacts, the accessory set or planetary ornament, I'm leaning towards using Sprightly Von Watch on screen, as it will boost her energy regeneration by a permanent 5%, helping you to ult more often, and if you invest speed into her main stat, she can have a 50% advanced forward effect, helping you to get your setup going. Alternatively, there is the 2-piece from Fleet of Ageless. Looks like as it will give her some survivability in her HP stats and also has the ability to boost all of her allies' attack by 8% when she's at main speed stat of 120. With light cones and relics covered, if it's not obvious, my stat preferences on Bronya is going to be speed and energy regeneration with some crit damage thrown in where I can get it for maxing her buffing capabilities. As such, I'm going to be looking for crit damage on the body, speed on the feet, and then energy regen rate percentage on her link rope as a priority for main stats. For the other main stats, I'd prioritize HP where you can, just because she'll be able to better take a hit with those stats and she doesn't funnel any of the other main stats not mentioned through her skill and ult. Finally, we have team synergy. Okay, so as discussed, Bronya is going to be a great offensive utility driver that will power up one of your damage dealers, and so you'll want to carefully balance support and even sub DPS options where needed. It's a bit difficult to recommend flat out team styles because every single fight in the game is going to vary, so let's focus on a more generalistic approach to Bronya's playstyle. This playstyle is nuke heavy. You'll want to keep her and your main damage dealer benefiting from her buffs alive so that when their turns land, she can funnel her buffs into that main damage dealer and have them commit massive amounts of boosted damage. Okay, so there are some people who run a damage Bronya build like I mentioned at the start because at max investment she can buff herself with 100% burst uptime, but I'm not going to detail that type of team build here because the investment just seems a little off for me when we'll be first playing a game with limited resources, and you'll want to have Bronya built more flexibly for as many teams as you can place her on. So with all that said, thinking about Bronya from a more generalistic point with her kit in mind, Bronya plays well with any main damage dealer. So a main DPS like Dan Huang, who is a free-to-play wind character, will be a great focus slot to receive her buffs. For the users with cash money dollar and good gacha luck, you can flexibly swap Dan Huang out for any other gacha damage dealers, thinking Hook, Shushang, Xingguan, Yanqing, like the list will go on. Now Yanqing will be my personal favorite to match with her, as his crit damage boosted from her skill, or is it ult? From her ult will help him a lot, as his kit, and if you watch my other guide that I've already done, will basically force Yanqing to crit as often as he deals his damage windows. With a main damage dealer attached in slot 2, you'll want to think about bringing a sub DPS or shielder for slot 3, depending on the content and with the mind to diversify your elemental breaks, especially if you're going to bring Dan Huang. You don't want to bring more than 2 wind characters in my opinion. So Herta or Saval will serve as good free-to-play options for the sub-DPS elemental damage dealer variability, and like I said, you could use a shielder such as March 7th or the Foul Trailblazer, depending on how you're building Bronya. If you stick a ton of HP on her, for example, with your main stats, March 7th shield could actually be thrown onto Bronya to pull aggro away, and that's going to help your main damage dealer stay out of harm's way. This third slot is not going to be pulling from Bronya's buff, but the idea is just to optimize your team's output and letting Bronya's and the main damage dealer do their thing. Finally, the fourth slot, I'm going to then want to run some sustain, so someone like Natasha is a safe bet without burning through too many of your skill points, and again, just diversify my elemental coverage a bit more. There's also Bailu if you're lucky enough to have her. If you want to split the recommendation in the third slot, you could also actually just carry across the shielder or the sub DPS here if you didn't use one in the third slot. So for example, you could run something like Bronya, your main damage dealer, a sub DPS in the third slot, and then a shielder in the fourth slot. So you can think pretty flexibly. Overall, Bronya is a pretty flexible unit when it comes to teams, and if you find someone to invest your damage buff into and then play around those 2 slots, depending on the content and your character roster, you just need to get some good sustain to keep those 2 people alive and some good skill point consumption management. There's a really good video on team comps that goes a little more detailed than this that I'll link below. I think his username is EOD Gamer. He genuinely covers all ranges of team comp, so probably best to also consider that video for some good team comp opportunities. But like I say, looking at Bronya's playstyle, stick with a main damage dealer, dish out some good damage, you are pretty set to go. She's a pretty future-proof unit when it comes to building teams around her. Okay, so I hope that video was helpful and enjoyable. This one's a little longer than my Yanqing one, but I wanted to go into some detail for this new character who I'm really excited to have. I hope you enjoyed the video. If it taught you anything, please leave a like or a comment. It will be very much appreciated. Thanks for your time. To those new subscribers to my channel, goodbye.